everyone, and welcome. You have joined the Leadership and Management webinar series. My name is Shannon McDonald, and I'm excited to have you join us today for building leadership resilience to overcome stress. And we have a wonderful speaker for you today, Rich Mayhew. He is the president of the Mayhew Group. He's also an instructor for Extension and has been for many years. And I know he has a wonderful presentation in store for you today. It's a treat to have him here and that he's able to share his expertise with you. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through the agenda for today. First of all, welcome, like I mentioned. I did want to let you know that this session is being recorded, so it will be made available to you after today's session. We will send that, if you're attending today, we'll send that to you via email in the next week or 10 days. And it also will be available up on our Leadership and Management Essentials page, which is at extension.ucsd.edu/levelup. Then we're going to go into a little bit about UC San Diego Extension. Then we'll kick off the presentation with Rich. And we'll end today with a little question and answer period with, via the chat box. So when we do have that, please do participate using the chat. In addition, we're going to be doing a couple polls today, and we're going to try and make this a little more conversational. So we may ask you to use that chat box throughout today's session as well. So keep an ear out. All right, so a little bit about UC San Diego Extension. We are the continuing education arm of the university. We have been around for almost 60 years, and we focus on practical education. We do critical skill development and real world knowledge, focused on current and cutting edge skills, and again, really focusing on career and personal growth. We have about 14 different areas, 4,500 classes, 100 different certificate programs, and varied areas from business, technology, science, education, healthcare, you name it, we probably got it. Speaking of which, we have some wonderful leadership programs that I wanted to just pop up on this screen since we are talking about leadership and management in this series. We have about 4 different programs we offer in addition to workshops and webinars. And so you can find out more about these programs at our Level Up page, so extension.ucsd.edu/levelup or /custom-programs. Speaking of which, we can actually customize any of these programs and bring them on site. So if your organization is interested in bringing programs on site for your employees, then we can do that for you. They're very customized, turnkey, flexible, so we can really customize them to meet whatever your needs are within your organization. And just real quick, this is the Leadership and Management webinar series. Like I mentioned, we've got 4 more on the docket in the next month or so and more to come. So those are the 4 coming up in the next few weeks. And also I wanted to let you know, again, this is where past webinars will be posted. So you can access those past recordings at this webpage as well and find out about all of those leadership programs I mentioned in our corporate education opportunities. Okay, I think that's all for me today. I'm going to turn it over to the man of the hour, Rich Mayhew, and he'll be talking again about building leadership resilience to overcome stress. So over to you, Rich.
All right, here we go. Very good. Well, welcome everybody. It's lovely to have you here for the next hour. Thank you. I know you have busy lives, and thank you for taking the time to hang out with us as we get into this very interesting subject of resilience and how we can help reduce our stress levels because of it. And we're also going to put a spin on it relative to your role as a leader. But anyway, no worries if you're not a leader right now. This will be good for the future. And if you're a leader, then we'll be digging into that quite a little bit. So really excited to work with you all. Where we all from? Anybody checked in yet? I just get a sense about how far afield everybody is. Oceanside, love it. Yes, nice up the coast.
London, UK.
London, thank you for taking your evening.
Riverside, England, Santa Barbara, North Wales, Milan, Houston, Canada, Mexico.
Great.
Yeah, great group today.
Welcome. Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
For those of you across the pond, you won't hear it very much, but I grew up in England. It'll come back and forth, I'm sure, as we go along on that. So if you hear the funny accent. So anyway, lovely, very good. We'll be very excited to hear from you as the presentation goes on. As I said, it's a timely topic. And one of the things I want to kind of assure you about before we kind of go any further on this is that if you can master this idea of resilience and how to manage that in yourself, you will end up with a happier and more successful life. And I've got some data that'll represent that a little later on in the hour. So with that, what I'd like to do is just sort of go to what the heck resilience is, and then after that we'll talk about the agenda for the hour. So what the heck is resilience? You probably have in your mind an idea about what resilience might be, and I bet it's not too far off from these definitions. So resilience is the psychological ability to rebound from adversity and setbacks. And this rebound issue is very interesting because we all have different times that it takes us to get ourselves back to where we were. And there isn't any right or wrong on that, but if you can understand what your rebound time is, it'll help you a lot on dealing with building up resilience. We also have a tremendous capacity to cope with and adjust the stress. And I'll give you an interesting fact about that in a minute. But we really are actually more resilient than we might give ourselves credit for. It's also about adapting to challenging life experiences and rising above them. So the idea here is to rather than get mired in what you're experiencing, resilience helps you step away from that and look at it, if you like, a little more dispassionately to be able to deal with it. And then finally, it's the ability to maintain a stable psychological and physical functioning. So no matter what's going on, you probably heard the phrase cool under pressure. This would be an example of that. Now, there's pros and cons for all of that, right? In other words, if you're too cool under pressure, people might see you as unresponsive. But you get the idea here, is that what we want to try and do as we build resilience is not be so reactive directly, particularly with other people, and in dealing with whatever they're going through as well. So that's a little bit about resilience and what the focus is today. And so here's our agenda. We already talked a little bit about resilience. We'll talk about types of resilience, how resilience is manifested, how it plays out, how you can build resilience, and looking at resilience for you as a leader. How are you going to be able to lead other people effectively in a resilient way? And as Shannon mentioned a little earlier, we'll do a Q&A session at the end. So some interesting facts about resilience. One is resilience is pretty common, and we all show remarkable levels of it. And this is very intriguing because you would think that given all the stuff that's been going on over the last 4 or 5 months, that we would have all collapsed on the floor. And some of us may have done. And even I had my period of collapsing on the floor about wondering what was going on. But then if you look at how we've responded, particularly in the business world, with having to work remotely, with a lot of things that we're used to getting taken away, with the unknowns about what's going to happen to our health, what's going to happen to the economics, what's going to happen to the future of medicine relative to the COVID. With all of that going on, we jumped right in and took care of business. And in the surveys that I've read and in my informal discussions with my clients around remote work, what we found is that productivity has actually improved since we've been staying at home. Now, on the other hand, happiness has not particularly, and loneliness is probably the biggest reason for that. We really do miss our pals at work. But what's interesting about this is that the fact that we dived in and we did whatever it took, that sort of indomitable human spirit, is a lot of what resilience is about. So we really are actually better at this than we might think we are. Secondly, resilience is situational. There are some parts of your life you might be really quite resilient, and other parts of your life that you maybe don't do so well in that regard. And it's all different for all of us. So please don't take the idea of resilience as being a one-shot deal, that it's just the way you are no matter what. It really does depend on the situation. And thirdly, research has shown us that we actually develop more resilience when we have a positive ratio of 3-to-1 in terms of feedback. The idea being, and I'll reference this a little later on, the idea being that for all the feedback we get, in order to be more resilient, we ought to have at least 3 positive pieces of feedback for every 1 piece of negative feedback that we might receive. Now, when I mention this with clients and executives, they kind of joke and they go, well, we think at work, sometimes it's the other way around. And that's why we have challenges and motivation. And I also kind of joke with parents, and they say, well, actually, that ratio for kids is 7-to-1, right? Got to give them 7 strokes for one kind of corrective piece of feedback. But the point here is, and you'll see this as we look at creating an environment to be resilient, you really do need to surround yourself with positivity. And that's not something I'm saying because I live in California and that's what we're all about. It has to really to do with how we are able to prepare ourselves for dealing with setbacks. When we can see things from a positive point of view, it helps resilience a lot. So those are just some background facts for us to bear in mind as we go forward. So here we go off with our first poll, Shannon. We're going to put this up, and the question is for you, what's the biggest drain on resilience at work? So just thinking of the workplace here, and we've given you quite a few choices, and we just want you to pick one, even though you might find that there's more than one that applies to you. Pick the one that you think is most impactful in terms of your drain on resilience, and I'll give you a little time to do that. Good, we're getting some responses in
Relationships is,
yeah, I noticed. Laura, thank you for commenting. We can go for tea. I think that sounds great. I'll probably brew a cup, or really a pot, actually. I don't do cups of teas. I have to say that even though many Americans will be happy with a cup of tea where you just put the tea bag in the cup and put boiling water in, I'm still old school. And I like to actually make a pot of tea.
well, we're getting close. We've got 76% here. So I'll give about 10 more seconds and then I'll
sounds good.
End it and we'll show the results. All right. Everybody got it in? Oh, one more. Oh, another one. All right. All right, I'm going to end this and I'm going to share the results. So here you go, Rich.
All right. So let's take a look at this. This is very fascinating. It's actually not work, the actual work itself that's challenging, that causes resilience issues. But what it comes to is difficult relationships or politics in the workplace. And that's really fascinating because you think, oh, I need more resilience now because of all of the craziness we're going through with dealing with COVID and lockdowns and all of that. But if you look at that item, that's something that was going on before we had any sort of issues around COVID. When we were in the workplace, this was still the biggest drain on our resilience. So we're going to see in a moment the slide that shows the research on this. So let me pop that up. And here we go. And I don't know why my poll is still stuck up there, but it is. That's life. So anyway, what's the biggest drain on resilience at work? So this is a survey from 835 British employees. And you'll see, like you, the majority of you, when I'm managing difficult relationships, politics in the workplace, that's when I get drained and I need resilience more than ever. And feel free to comment on that in chat if you like, and we'll reference back. Because I find that really fascinating. That's not actually the work itself, even though many of us might get feeling a little tough when we get criticized. We're usually pretty resilient around that. And for many of us, our personal lives don't get in the way of work as much as we might think sometimes, and we can handle that as well. So really pleased to see that you're in alignment with what the survey says. Hey, Shannon, can you remove the poll from my screen, or is that something I have to do?
You can just click out of it.
Well, if I can figure out my...
Oh, there should be a little X box, I hope.
Well, there is, but I can't move my mouse to do it. So,
oh no.
Oh, it's just, I don't know what the heck. I'm going to get there, and then we'll get back into it again. All right, so let's take a look at types of resilience. And there's 3 different types of resilience that, that we are managing in terms of, if you imagine our resilience bank account in there, that resilience has come from different kinds of savings, if you like. One of them, excuse me, is natural types of resilience. This is the resilience you were born with. We have certain propensity for resilience, and it's in our DNA. So we came in with that in the world, and it is what it is. Can we change that? Well, we may not be able to change the DNA, but we can certainly manage ourselves if we find that our resilience isn't as much as we would like. And that leads to the second type of resilience, which is adaptive resilience. Adaptive resilience is what you've learned as you've gone through life experiences. It's the trial by fire kind of idea. And that you've had situations in your life that have forced you to be resilient. A real obvious one was when we had the pandemic happen. It was in the middle of March for me in California, and it was like over a weekend, all of a sudden it hit. We started locking everything down. At the same time, I was getting emails from clients who I had work that I'd already scheduled with. This was face-to-face work, saying, Rich, we'd love to do it, but we just can't do it, sorry. And one by one, my gigs were getting canceled. And so I had to think, well, how am I going to deal with this? This is pretty stunning. We didn't know where things were going. We knew we were locking down. The work seemed to be going away. And so I had to really rely on my adaptive skills to help me through on that. And so this is now something that I'm adding to my adaptive toolkit, is how I've learned to deal with resilience during the pandemic. And then the third one is learned resilience. And learned resilience is the skills that you build in dealing with it over time. So you better believe that prior to March, I had resilience skills that I had built up. Since March, I've now added to those skills. And you've probably found the same things yourselves, that in fact you have skills that you've developed that maybe you didn't even know you had, that have really come out of necessity here. So know that you're not kind of stuck with who you are, that you've had a lot of experience from the past and you're relying on that to help you. And you're building new skills, and I really urge you to continue that journey of building new skills on that. So here we go with poll number 2. Where do you get your resilience from? And you're going to see less choices this time. I would like you to pick one of where you believe you get your resilience from. Either from your organization, the place you work, from the actual work you do, from the relationships you have with other people, or from yourself. Pick one, please. I know we're still getting some folks in, so please feel free to continue voting.
Yeah, about 10 more seconds.
I want to thank Heather for a really insightful comment. Thanks, Heather, on about it can be even more challenging in managing relationships and politics now we're remote, and it's so true. I'm finding that with all of my clients, and that would be probably something for another webinar would be great, but we can chat about that in Q&A as well. And thank you also, Stephen. You said reading body language is tricky, and it certainly is when everybody's a what, 1 inch by 1 inch box. It's really tough. And Ivan, thank you also. You see that it's not a perfect line that we draw when we get into our work mode, that personal problems can bleed in to that and vice versa.
So I shared.
Shannon, do you see from a man, he says, how do you access the poll?
I already closed the poll, so it might have been a little late. I've already shared the results. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No worries. All right. Well, you know, Aman and also Ore, if you want to comment in the chat about how you would have voted, that'd be lovely. All right. So let's take a look here. What do we got? Less so relying on your organization to help you build your resilience. And that's very good because not a knock on organizational life, but it's really not designed to provide that for you particularly. The only exception might be the military. What I found, I've done some work with the Navy SEALs, and they obviously build in resilience processes and techniques, but that's sort of a different situation. The work you do, you're not going to get resilience from that, I understand. Your relationships, yeah, that can be helpful, but really it's yourself. And so let me share with you the results of the survey that I've collected. Again, the same British employees, and look how they rated this item. And like you all, you do rely on yourself a lot more to be able to get resilience built up. And I'm pleased to see that because guess what? It is really only in your control. Resilience is not only a personal matter, it's an internal matter. And you might very well be affected by how friends are helping you and to some degree your boss and so on. But really, it's really going to be up to you to do all the heavy lifting of building a resilience. And you'll see the rest of this session we're doing today is really designed around how do you help yourself around that. So thank you so much for participating in the poll. I need to go through my routine again to get rid of it.
Hey, Rick, somebody mentioned that it doesn't add up to 100. Were people able to do multiple selections during this survey?
Oh, you're asking the participants?
Somebody said, oh, the numbers don't add up to 100% on this graph.
Well,
people were able to choose multiple selections.
I suppose they must have been able to, even
Yeah.
though I wasn't able to just pick one, but that might be right.
Okay.
And thank you, Stephen, for commenting on that. You can be our numbers guy today. Make sure we're on track. Okay, so with that, we're taking a look at those results. Let's talk about what are some of the pathways to resilience. In other words, how can we start building that resilience that you have, knowing that you already have a repository of it. Now we're just going to be adding to it. And what I found is there's 5 different ways that you can do this. And I don't know if one is better than the other. They're all important. It probably is worthwhile for you to keep this in mind and think about what's best for you right now in terms of building your resilience. The first one is probably not much of a surprise. I think over the years, we've known that when we get upset or angry about something or when something is stressing us out, we've always had the advice of, well, go walk it off or go outside and get some fresh air and just do something active. Some of you might go to the gym to do that when the gyms were open. Some of you might go out for a walk. I think we can still do that. Engaging in sports, doing something vigorous. We found that all of that helps in building your resilience and helping you deal with the stresses in the moment. The second one is the mental approach to building resilience. This could be anything from literally getting yourself out in a calm place. It could be out in nature somewhere, out in a park, or actually up in the mountains if you can get away there. Or for where I am in San Diego, I go to the beach. Something that's natural, that isn't necessarily your typical environment, but most importantly, it's somewhere where you can actually relax, and that environment will help you relax. Now, for those of you who are stranded in high rises somewhere or in the Midtown Manhattan in a apartment block there, and you go, well, I can't get over to Central Park easily, even conjuring up serene scenes in your mind has a tremendous impact on helping you build resilience. And so closing your eyes and thinking of something really pleasant, particularly something natural and relaxing, can really help build your resilience. The third one is emotional. We already mentioned this, which is if you can ensure that you experience positive emotions, that will help you build your resilience. And we talked about the 3-to-1 ratio. One of the things that I really recommend is to really be around those people who are affirming to you. And I'm not necessarily suggesting dump all your negative friends. You know, everybody has negative times. And I'm sure if somebody really was negative all the time, you probably wouldn't have them as a friend anyway. You may not have that choice with relatives, but at least with friends. But at least get those people around you who are positive and affirming. And those are the ones you want to talk to, particularly when you're dealing with something that's pretty stressful. The fourth one is social, bit related to emotional, I guess. Hanging out with friends, family, being around other people. And this gets back to this research that we've done on remote work, where we said productivity right now is going up, which sounds pretty good. CEOs are happy. Look at that. We all went home and we're still working. But the big issue seems to be social. Time and time again, when we do surveys, we find that people are saying, I'm missing the workplace because I'm missing my colleagues. I'm missing the interaction that we had. Loneliness is tough. And yes, I might have a family at home that I deal with, but that's a different kind of situation. I'm missing the people that I work with. So just finding ways, though, to hang out with people that are good for you is really key. And then the final one is personal control. It's interesting. When I work with clients who are stressed out a fair amount or feeling as though things have kind of got them a little down, what I discover is that they are actually worrying and being concerned about those things that they really cannot control. And so one of the things that I advise them to do, and I'm advising all of you to do this, is when you're in a situation where you're under stress or where things are unpredictable and you're not at your best, I want you to focus only on those tasks and those situations that you can actually control. If you cannot control the situation, do not spend time thinking about it. Now, this might be easier said than done, given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, our politicians are doing crazy things, we're not quite sure what the future looks like, but we can't control a lot of those things. And it's not helpful to us to really spend time worrying about them, being concerned about it. The word for that is rumination, and I'll talk about rumination later in the presentation, but it's really, really bad for us. So if you've got to focus on those things that you can actually control. So when talking about March, when things fell apart and my business started to go away, so to speak, I realized that I couldn't control anything around the pandemic or around, honestly, what my clients were going to do. They didn't know what to do. But what I could control is, one, how I responded to it. And secondly, I could do certain things that would help me feel better. For example, one of the things I did was I sat down and went, okay, financially, how are things going to look for me this year? And I crunched the numbers. I could control that. And then interestingly enough, Brian Chesky, who's the president of Airbnb, I saw a posting which I thought was fascinating. This is probably a week or two after in California we had a lockdown. And he said, you know, our business has really been devastated. As you can imagine, Airbnb, nobody's booking anymore. And he said, one of the things that we're doing is we have this called a mantra, in that every day we should find a little money, save a little money, and make a little money. And I thought that was an incredible, resilient statement because it had to do with personal control. All those things they could control. They could find a little money somewhere. They could figure out some angle to make a buck or two, and certainly save money as well, which they did. They could control that. So I really urge you to put special attention into only focusing on those things that you can control. And Kathleen, thank you so much. Don't worry, be happy. I love it. That's exactly what today is all about. Now, I want to mention to you back to this idea of focus on those things you can control, is the Stockdale paradox. Some of you may have heard of this, particularly if you're based in the US, but this is a very interesting story. There was a guy, David Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And he was tortured and all of that. He came back and stayed in the military and actually promoted him, I think, to Vice Admiral in the end. And he said, you know, when I was actually a POW and I was in the camp there, he said, I realized that you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. And I really urge you to keep this in mind as you go forward, in that in order for us to build resilience, we have to have faith that things will be better in the end for us, because they always are. So we have to have faith in that and not lose it, even though right now in front of us, we are dealing with a situation that may be really quite different from that. So for me, back in March, when I saw my business really flipping upside down, and I came down to think about what am I going to do and setting a strategy, I always had faith that things one day would be better. Now, here we are, what are we in? July, and they're a little bit better, but I believe that we will have that point. And I have to keep that in my mind. At the same time, I can't just go, oh, well, then no worry. I'm not going to do anything. I'll just wait around. I don't have to change anything. Instead, I'm facing the brutal fact. And I pivoted my business to online. And there's a variety of other things I've done as well. So keep this in mind, that, and it might be helpful as you coach other people to let them know that, is do have faith in the future. It will be different, but don't lose sight of where you are today. So one of the self-assessments that I use is called the Workplace Big Five. Find it really, really useful. And I'm not going to get into detail about it because we're talking here about resilience, but there are 5 dimensions that the Workplace Big Five assessment measures. One of them is the need for stability. And I want to focus on that for a moment. The need for stability dimension really has to do with how you go about responding to stress. And there are some people who, on the scale of stability, are more resilient. And they tend to handle stress in a calm, steady, logical, and secure way. So you may be one of those people, or you may know people who are like that, boy, cool under pressure. There was a pilot, I'll mispronounce his last name, so his nickname was Stolly. This was, I think, a couple of years ago. He was flying a commercial jet into New York City. He had a problem. I think birds flew into his engine and he had difficulties, and he very coolly and calmly landed the plane. This is like a 737, landed the plane in the Hudson River, and everybody was rescued and safe. And so he would be an example of someone who probably scores high on the Workplace Big Five as resilient. Now, the other side of this is, because there's no free lunch in life, folks, and if you do anything to an extreme or excess, you're going to have this sort of counterbalancing behavior on the other end, is that people who are seen as very resilient could be seen as maybe expressing less empathy, because they're so cool, calm, and collected. Other people are kind of upset, and it's more difficult for them to respond in an excited way or excitable way to what other people are going through. Then on the other end of the continuum, you have people who are more reactive, and they tend to be more concerned, attentive, and excitable. These are people where you see a reaction when something's not going right. Now, of course, their drawback is a lot of times it's expressed as an emotional, a negative one. And so here we have, people who kind of create anxiety, and they don't really necessarily mean to. but they like to get everybody else kind of worked up too. So with that as a backdrop, let's take a look at some of the subtraits. So there are 4 subtraits associated with this particular dimension of stability. And they have to do with worry, intensity, interpretation, and rebound time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to give you a sense that this idea of stability is a little more complicated than one thing. So one subtrait is worry. Do you tend to be at ease most of the time, or do you tend to frequently worry? And when I got my results, I'd been then a consultant for over 20 years, and I figured I was pretty cool, calm, and collected. And I was surprised that I was up in the more frequently worry end. And I was trying to think about why that was, because I wasn't sitting there biting my nails all the time or fretting. So what was that about? And I realized what it was that I was worried in that I would be alert and concerned if something didn't go right. That's the first place I would go, is what does this sort of mean and what do we need to do? So that would be why I'd be on a higher on the worry end. Intensity, are usually cool and calm or quick to temper. And I was a little more, I wasn't high on this, I was probably occasionally heated. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound like me at all. I'm usually pretty cool under pressure. I had a job as sort of a fix-it leader in the banking industry for many, many years where I was in tense situations. And I always thought I was cool under pressure. And then I realized that what happened was I usually was expressive when I had some sort of stress going on. It wasn't necessarily a negative expression, but I was expressive. And so people saw that as, well, it was the way it was described for me by a boss. He said, Rich, you really are very passionate, aren't you? I thought it was actually a nice way to say it, but that was what was coming out in intensity, was that passion. The third one is an interpretation of how you see things. Are you more optimistic or less optimistic around things? And then the final one is rebound time. Do you rebound pretty quickly when you get a setback, or do you take longer to rebound? And I scored higher on this, so I was longer rebound, and that actually blew my mind. I thought I adjusted pretty quickly when things came up. And then I thought back on what happened when COVID hit here in California in March. And as I said, mid-March was sort of the time when it really hit. And it took me about 3 weeks for me to actually get my head together enough to get refocused on what I needed to do. And it wasn't like I was spending 3 weeks laying on the sofa all day or in bed sleeping. I was active and engaged, but I couldn't get my head together around it. I couldn't really make sense of it. I couldn't figure out where to go. I was going in many different directions. And I realized that for me, maybe 3 weeks was a long rebound time. I don't know. But bear that in mind. You might want to think about how long it takes you to get back to normal when you get something stressful going on. So here are some characteristics of resilient people. Connor Davison, 2 folks that did some research on this. One's out of Merck, so scientist. The other one's an academic. And they found that there are really 5 characteristics that summarized. Their list was a little longer. I actually took the artistic license to summarize them. And that is, they are quite adaptable when it comes to dealing with change. They're not stuck so much in their ways or the way it has to be. They also develop personal goals, and if they can, they develop collective goals. That is, groups with their team and so forth. So one of the things I did was, once I kind of got over this shock of COVID, was I developed some very clear goals. What I was going to do in the next month, what I was going to do in the next 3 months. I have goals now every month. I have goals through the end of the year. I have even goals for the end of next year, because we still don't know what's really going to go on. And that's really helping me more resilient than if I just wandered through every week, not quite clear what I should be doing next. A sense of humor is really important. If you don't have one naturally, that's okay. Be around people who do. One of the things I found, I was gravitating to comedy shows on TV and comedy specials and so on. It was just my way of dealing with that. patience is a virtue is no more true than now, because things are changing all the time. Before we actually met up with all you folks, Shannon and I were chatting, and we were going, gosh, it seems like almost 1 week to the next. We don't know what is going on. So patience is really critical. And then back to the Stockdale paradox, having faith and optimism that things will go well in the future. So they found that this is pretty true of those people who are seen as resilient. So let's talk a minute about leadership, and then I'll wrap things up. So leadership has 3 different aspects to it. This is the work that John Carter's done, but if you do any sort of work on leadership and research it, you're going to find it all says mostly the same stuff, which is we have to set a clear direction and vision for where we want to go. And that's whether it's ourselves or whether it's as a group or the people we lead. We have to get people to buy into that, get them aligned behind whatever that vision or direction is, and then motivate and inspire them on an ongoing basis. So that was what leadership was pre-COVID. That is leadership post-COVID, well, in COVID, and that's going to be leadership post-COVID. So we're going to have to do things and help ourselves with resilience to continue to be this way as a leader. And so the interesting thing is there's been some research done on that, on what do leaders do who are resilient. So first, let me show you a stunning statistic. Look at this information. A consulting company called Zenger Folkman went out and identified how effective leaders were. They have a lot of 360 assessments and so on they use to be able to collect that data. And one of the things they were measuring was resilience in the 360. And what they found was, and this is, I think, really quite stunning, that those people who were most resilient or seen by others as most resilient as leaders were way more effective as leaders than those who were least resistant. And this is obviously perceptions of others on the leader. So I thought that was really stunning, and it shows you the impact that having resilience does on you being an effective leader. So what did they say we should work on to be better as resilient leaders? One is communicate your intentions. So that gets back to the idea of having a clear vision or direction for yourself and for the people that you lead. Be coachable and open to feedback. One of the things, if you've studied teamwork, you'll know that developing trust is absolutely critical to good teamwork. And part of having trust is being able to be open to feedback, giving and receiving, and be allowed to be coached by others. Thirdly, develop positive, trusting relationships. I just mentioned that one. Trying new ideas. This gets back to being able to be changeable and willing to try different things. The pivoting I've made to online has been such a learning experience for me, and it's allowed me to try a whole lot of new ideas and invent new ways of doing things that I hadn't done before. Developing others are key, and I'm sure you have staff right now that are probably really keen for direction and getting guidance from you on how they can help themselves be happier and more resilient at work. Be a champion of change. We have no choice, I think, around that. And then finally, be decisive. It's much easier to steer a ship when it's in motion. So get something in motion, decide on something, get your group moving, and then if you need to re-steer it, you can do that much more easily. So with that, how to bounce back when things are tough. Look for what you can control. Don't ruminate about what went wrong. Look for positives about what can happen. So this is sort of related. You don't want to look in the past and go, oh, these things happen, and where did we go wrong? And oh my goodness, and I can't believe I screwed that one up, or it didn't go right. Instead, we need to look for positives that can happen out of this. You probably already seen one of those. Like we used to do a pretty good job of keeping our home lives away from work. We come to work, we dress differently. Some people wouldn't talk about home life. And now we're at home working remotely, and guess what? We're on Zoom and people see the backgrounds and we get to talk about ourselves. So that's the sort of positive that came out of this. Keep the problem and issue contained. Don't let it take over your life. If you've got a challenge or something that is difficult, keep it in a box. Don't let it permeate other aspects of your life. And do know that nothing goes on forever. That's always been true about life. Every time we think this is going to be it, it's changed for good. No, it hasn't. And one of the reasons for this is people don't change. We really don't. And so we'll go back to the way things were, maybe not in exactly the same way, but we will go back and things will be better and people will make money and there will be a workplace and all of that. So with that, I'd like to leave you with this. One is rumination is a major stressor. What the heck is rumination? It's thinking of the past or future and attaching negative consequences to it. So one of the things that my girlfriend taught me some years ago, she said, Rich, don't have regrets. And I pushed back on her and I said, what? Are you kidding me? Of course I regret some things. She says, it doesn't help you. It's ruminating. It won't do you any good. And also, by the way, don't ruminate about what could go wrong about the future. So that's one of the key things that I want to leave you with is banish rumination immediately. And I'm going to leave you with this. Well, I won't leave you, but we'll end the presentation with this statement. One of the best bosses I ever worked for, a guy named J.B. Woods, said to me at one point, Rich, be a calmer of anxiety, not a creator of it. And I want to leave that with you as a way to think about going forward and how you can help others. So I know we ran over a little bit here, but Shannon, I think it's time for Q&A.
Yeah, I think there's some questions already, and thanks so much, Rich. It was a great presentation. So a couple already came through. So the first one was someone who is outwardly resilient but still feels stress. Are they?
I'm sorry, say that again, Shannon. I missed it.
Okay, someone who is outwardly resilient but still feels stress. Are they considered to be resilient? And then what measure of this is internal versus external?
Okay, so the first one is if they keep it inside themselves. And this is one of those things where what they're demonstrating is probably good resilience behaviors and maybe good leadership, be a calmer of anxiety. But their own internal processes, they're still not resilient.
Right.
So this is one of the challenges we have. What was the second part of the question?
And then what measure of this is internal versus external? I think that was going back to that slide where you were showing, you know, the different resiliencies. Are they negative, neutral, or positive?
Okay. I'm having a little challenge on how to answer that.
Maybe Nellie can
way of saying that, do you think?
Yeah, I think there was the measurement of, what measure of this, how much resilience can you show internally versus externally, and does that affect how you might lead and your resilience level?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of what I showed you in terms of the scales of resilience, mm-hmm. Those are all internal, right? We don't necessarily show those, or we might. Mm-hmm. And this gets back to the idea of how excitable people are. And we can control that, by the way. That is something we can do, and I've done that. I'd like to think I'm still very passionate, but when we get to stressful situations, my passion gets dialed way down. I do that on purpose.
Somebody said that test that, that resilience, negative, neutral, or positive, is that test publicly available for people?
Well, no, I guess the answer to that, it's probably not. Okay. You have to get certified to be able to administer to the test because it's psychometrically based. Now, there might be some sort of what I call kind of quick and dirty tool out there that might give you some idea of that. There's a link to the website that we have on the last slide. Go check them out. And then you can also Google Workplace Big Five. And because they're based on the solid principles of their 5 personality traits that have been around forever, there's a lot of people who've riffed off of that with other products and so on. And you might find something on there for free online. I haven't dug for it, but there might be.
Great. Somebody says, does the rebound determine the impact of the stress? Depression is horrible when impacted by liars, threats, assault, and character.
Do you mean the amount of time it takes to rebound? Mm-hmm. I would think it might very well. Yes. That even if you think, I rebound pretty quickly. Remember back to one of the first slides, I said it's situational. And so it just depends, right? I rebound pretty quickly to my local football team, Brighton and Hove Albion. For those of you in the UK, go Seagulls. If they lose, my rebound on that's pretty fast. Well, part of it's because I'm used to it, but my rebound is not fast when it comes to a good friend who's betrayed me or has done something that has really thrown me under the bus. So it does depend.
Yeah. Are there other tests to help determine resiliency?
Yes, there are. And boy, I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. I don't use other ones particularly. The Workplace Big Five is a lot of times my go-to assessment tool. Another one called Harrison Assessments. They have a lot of work that they do around stresses and how we flip to different behaviors when we're under stress. So that's called Harrison Assessments. I also use that one. Unfortunately, again, you have to be certified in order to use it. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. In choosing the response, in choosing the response, I asked if age attributed to selection. So I wonder now, what about maturity? So back on that initial, when we were doing the polling, she was wondering if age attributed to the certain, to how they responded. And now she's wondering also about.
Well, yeah, I would imagine it would, although I don't know that for a fact scientifically. And the only reason I say that is that now that I'm a little more mature and had more life experience, I react differently to those things that that upset me or might be concerning to me. So I still find that honestly, relationships with others is important to me. And so that might very well cause a ding on my resilience. But in other cases, work can really, you know, be impactful on my ability to be resilient. And I wouldn't say that was so when I was in my 20s. So I think age probably has something to do with it.
Bonnie's wondering if there's more learning about this topic. Do we have any other meetings coming up or any additional resources we can share? Bonnie, great question. We're always taking ideas for new workshops and things like that. Rich does teach a few of our workshops here, and this seems to be getting a lot of buzz, this particular topic. So maybe we can convince him to do a longer workshop on this.
Yeah, there we go.
And then I know that, Rich, you have a resource you're planning on sharing, right? That for the attendees of today?
Yeah, we've got one. Hopefully you received. I think I might have sent it to you. If not, I'll send it again. But we do have something that's a handy little tool that I did find online. And in fact, that organization that developed that tool, you go on their website, they'll have a lot of other resilience resources too. Yeah, it's a handy little 3 or 4 pager that'll help you in working through resilience issues.
Yeah, so if you're attending today, you'll receive that resource, additional resource that you can review. Please continue to check back on our website for additional workshops that are coming up. Yvonne asks, how is introvert versus extrovert personality related to resilience?
It's probably the way it's demonstrated. I'm an extrovert, and I think that's where the passion thing comes in. And so you may find that those who are extroverted are more likely to share that A, that they are stressed, and B, that they're having trouble with it, or they're not having trouble with it. Whereas with introverts, you don't see that. And so, yeah, they may not share. You may have to ask them to find out more. How are you responding to this, Shannon? How is this going for you? And then they'll share.
Right, exactly. You kind of had to pull it out of them. Are there ways as a leader / manager to help non-resilient staff members develop more resilience?
One, share these slides from today, because I think you can send those out, right? Yeah, do that. And what I would do, honestly, is boil it down to 3 or 4 elements of building resilience that you found useful for yourself. Because sharing personal stories about this really is more impactful for people that you work with. That's why I use stories during this presentation about me. It makes a difference. So don't feel as though you got to spout off the theory. Just boil it down and say, here are the 3 or 4 things to really focus on. And here's an example of how I did it. And I think that will help you a lot.
Yeah, somebody commented, do you believe resilience can be taught? Which I think we kind of talked about in the learned resilience, right?
Yeah, it's the learn this. Some, you know, how much is your DNA? I don't know. but some of it is. Some of it's your life experience, and some of it you're still learning. So yes, you can learn to do it.
All right. Any other questions? We have a couple more minutes left. Okay. All right.
All right, here are the references. Oh, I was threatening that I was going to sing to Shannon, but I've lost my nerve on it. And the reason I bring this up is one of the links there is a YouTube video to this amazing, I think amazing because I like jazz, Diana Krall, great pianist and singer. She really is great. But the point about this is that I'm always looking for things that will help me work through resilience and if I have tough times. And after, March or April, and I was feeling kind of down, I came across this tune, and then I looked it up, and it was actually written in 1936 by Jerome Kern. It's part of the Great American Songbook. It's called Pick Yourself Up. And she does a nice jazzy kind of version of it. And I love the lyrics, because it's all around, basically when I found that, nothing's impossible. I found that when my chin is on the ground, I pick myself up, dust myself off, and start all over again. So it's simple lyrics, but it's a kind of uplifting. So go listen to Diana Krall. I won't sing today.
Marla says, oh, please, please, please do it.
No, I'm not going to do it.
I
don't want to spoil the rest of your day.
Well, excellent. Well, I'm going to take over the screen here. And yes, I'm going to go here, share. Okay. Excellent. So thank you so much, Rich. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking out of the day.
Yeah, this topic is just so important for today. And, we do need to look at our resilience and figure out how to manage the stressors that come into our day-to-day environment. And, as you and I were discussing earlier, it changes sometimes day to day or week to week, right? Sometimes we're feeling like we're getting in the groove and then something else hits us. So it's important to continue to assess where we are. So I wanted to make sure you knew that, again, our leadership and management webinar series will continue with great presentations such as this. I'm going to pop the link into the chat box so you guys have easy access to go and register. And again, if you attended today, we will be sharing that PowerPoint with you. So stay tuned. We actually already have that queued up and ready. So in the next day or two, you should get those resources and the PowerPoint if you attended today. And then we'll send out that the link to the webinar recording in about 7 to 10 days, or you can always check it out at that link I just posted. And without further ado, thank you so much again, Rich. We appreciate it. If there are any questions about this series or anything that comes up, please don't hesitate to email me. And we will look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thank you so much again, Rich. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you all very much.